So I'm going to pass on now to our next keynote speakers, who are Kirsten and Maria, who are going to talk about the HSEP and the Royal Opera House Bridge.
Thanks, Liz. So my name is Kirsten Hutton and I am the Programme Manager for Hertfordshire for Royal Opera House Bridge. And Liz has asked me to talk to you today about the work that the Hertfordshire Cultural Education Partnership is doing in Hertfordshire for children and young people and their access to creativity and cultural learning. I'm going to be doing a tag team presentation today with my colleague Maria. So Maria, do you want to say hello and who you are?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm head of HSEP. I'm a principal lecturer at the University of Hertfordshire based in the School of Creative Arts, and I run a music education business. So I come at this from various viewpoints.
Thanks, Maria. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about Royal Opera House Bridge and who we are, for those of you who don't know, and our relationship to the Hertfordshire Cultural Education Partnership, and then talk to you in more detail about the Cultural Education Partnership and specifically about some needs research we undertook at the beginning of last year and how that has fed into our learning and thinking about what we're going to be doing next. So in terms of Royal Opera House Bridge and who are we? We are one of 10 bridge organisations and we are funded by the Arts Council. So there are 10 bridge organisations throughout England, and we cover Essex, North Kent, Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire. And we have 4 key objectives that make up our business plan that help to support children and young people access high quality arts and cultural education and learning. And those objectives are about partnerships. So we have developed our cultural education partnership, which we'll talk about in more detail in a moment, which aims to increase the quality and quantity and extend the reach of cultural learning opportunities for children and young people. We look at improving schools through raising achievement in cultural learning, and primarily we do that through supporting schools on their arts mark journeys or looking at how they can embed creative and cultural learning opportunities within their curricula. We invest our expertise and resources into collaborations. We work primarily with our local cultural education partnerships to develop in large scale co-investments, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing in Hertfordshire in that respect. And finally, influencing others to change. So we are champions of cultural learning, and we also support others in the sector, in the education sector, in the cultural sector, to be those agents for change and influence others. And we do that in a number of ways, but one of those ways is we run quite a lot of training for both the education and cultural sectors. So to kind of give you a sense of where we are, I said that we cover Kent, North Kent, Essex, Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire. And I'm showing you this map because this shows where these local cultural education partnerships are. And essentially a local cultural education partnership is just a collective of partners who represent the education sector, the cultural sector, and other organisations who work with children and young people. So for us, that includes our local authority partners, YC Hertfordshire, and others working with children and young people. You'll see that these some of these areas have got green or yellow outlines, and this map is slightly out of date, but I wanted to show you this because Hertfordshire has its cultural education partnership, but you'll notice that it's the only county-wide one. The rest of them are either towns or unitary authorities. And this is really interesting, and I think this is really unique to Hertfordshire. We're one of the only county-wide cultural education partnerships. And I think that's primarily because Hertfordshire has a really strong track record of working in partnership across the county. And even though we aim to be place-based, and therefore we have to work very strategically in looking at what each individual place needs, Hertfordshire has demonstrated strong partnership track record, which we've seen through the Year of Culture. So I'm going to pass over to Maria now to talk more specifically about the Hertfordshire Cultural Education Partnership.
Thanks, Kirsten. It's lovely to see some of our partners here. And these goals were developed working with our steering group and working group. So our first goal is to ensure access to a high quality, diverse cultural and creative and cultural education for all young people. So that's young people up to the age of 19 who live or learn in Hertfordshire, in particular those who are disadvantaged and hard to reach. And there were some interesting findings in our need analysis about that group. Secondly, to enable children and young people living or learning in Hertfordshire to become active co-creators of their creative and cultural learning. And that's really feeding into our projects in our phase 2, which I'll talk about. And then thirdly, to enable all young people to progress through high quality creative and cultural learning experiences, following learning pathways that will help develop creative skills, employability, and where desired careers in cultural industries. So the partnership investment, so this was secured in partnership with the Bridge and our local partners, and it was originally a 2-year plan. Due to COVID, we've extended that. So our investment partners are Annie and the team at Decorum, Letchworth Garden City Heritage Foundation, Stevenage Borough Council, Watford with Laura, and Welwyn Hatfield Borough Council. We also have additional investment partners from the University of Hertfordshire, and so that's a range of different partners within the university are working together on this, and West Herts College. And then other partners include schools, both primary, secondary and SEN, Hertfordshire Music Service, Trestle Theatre Company, Hertfordshire County Council, Heritage and Archives, and we've had feedback from a wider range of partners, including YC Herts as well. So the partnership investment was divided into 3 phases. So phase 1, as Kirsten mentioned, took place in the early part of last year. This was a needs analysis and piece of research that aimed to help us understand the differing needs of geographical areas. So we looked at Hertfordshire as a whole, but then also zoomed in on those 5 areas where we have partnerships. So it was in-depth research, and it included youth consultation and provision mapping and data collection. And that's been really instrumental in our understanding of culture across the county for young people, but also in feeding into our second stage, which is our commissioning phase, which we are in the process of sort of starting right now. So this is where we're going to be testing interventions based on those outcomes. So we're currently finalising our commission bid briefs. So these projects are quite wide-ranging, but they're looking at working with partners, so schools, with local councils, and with cultural providers such as local museums. So we aim to trial and test some learning through pilots, leading to skills development, looking at access and youth voice. And this builds on the work that the RH Bridge, Kirsten and her colleague Tina have done with the creative teacher networks across the county, which has been really key in giving us access to teachers and looking at how we can support young people with their cultural learning. The final steps, which will be towards the end of this year and into the beginning of next year, will be evaluation. So we're going to recruit an evaluator who will help to inform our progress and next steps with the HSEP. Thanks, Kirsten. So the needs analysis was commissioned in partnership with the university's Widening Access and Student Success team. So this is a body who look to raise aspirations in young people, whether that's going to university or apprenticeships or other forms of progression. And the WAS team wanted to understand engagement opportunities, barriers to access and the needs of young people in terms of education sector, and look at the cultural sector. So the research was carried out between January and April. And we were a little concerned when we kind of all came back in September, when many of our partners returned from furlough, that the findings might not be relevant, but actually in conversations with partners, the findings are still very valid. So over to Kirsten.
Okay, so we're going to just talk to you a little bit briefly about the findings, the headline findings from the needs research, because it's quite interesting. And we recruited 2 consultants to support us, and one consultant has a lot of experience in talking to schools and bringing cultural organisations and schools together, and the other consultant was from the audience agency. So this data comes from a correlation and collection of lots of different data sources from Hertfordshire, and this represents Hertfordshire's levels of cultural education, cultural engagement, apologies, overall, and this covers adults and young people. But it's a really interesting picture, and actually it's a really positive picture because it has slightly higher levels of cultural engagement than the rest of the population of England. So we've got a good starting point happening. I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail on this because you'll have a copy of this, but just to let you know that these segmentation headings here are audience agency definitions, and you can find them on the website of what they mean. But essentially the metroculturals tend to represent those who are high engagers in cultural activity, and heydays are those, all the way down to heydays, are the ones who kind of are more incidental engagers in cultural activity. So in terms of the headlines, we've broken this down into 4 sections, and this is how the needs analysis broke it down as well. So our stakeholders, the education sector, cultural sector, and young people. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but I'm going to talk to you briefly about the education, cultural sector, and young people. And I think what was interesting is that the needs analysis showed us that most of the information that came from it was stuff that we already knew or thought we knew, but it was good to have evidence that that what we thought we knew was right. So, you know, for the education sector, a lot of what came out was that schools have competing demands, changing policies and tight budgets. There's an ever increasing emphasis on STEM subjects, which have direct connection to careers, but sometimes that squeezes out creative subjects. And one of the biggest things that came out of it was skills needed for the creative industries, and teachers being supported in knowing what those skills were and passing those on to their students. And additionally, students having an understanding of what skills they needed and where the opportunities were for pathways into the creative industries. For the cultural sector, there's very few national portfolio organisations throughout Hertfordshire, and they're all based in one area in Watford, and they're doing amazing work, but actually there could be some more interconnectivity between the other cultural providers that are thriving and doing amazing work in Hertfordshire. And there are a lot, and I think the Year of Culture has demonstrated there's a lot happening, but we could do more to connect with each other. And going on from that, schools have difficulty in identifying providers who can work with schools, and conversely, culture providers have difficulty in accessing schools to tell them about their work. And then finally, we talked to quite a few young people from across the spectrum. And unsurprisingly, the big thing that they came out with was saying that they wanted culture providers, education providers to engage with them on their own terms. And for us and them, but for us to understand how they use technology to engage. And quite interestingly, we asked them a question about what culture means to them, because we're really interested in thinking about this idea of language and the language we use compared to the language that young people use, and is it the same? And they don't see much of a difference between arts, the words arts, culture, creativity, and heritage. So when we talk about them, we mean slightly different things to how they hear them. And obviously there's a wide spectrum of views, so this requires a segmented approach and a needs-led approach. And I'm going to pass back over to Maria now to go into more depth about the young people's needs.
Thank you. I'm aware of time, so it won't be too in-depth. But the interests of young people were perhaps where we might expect. So performing arts, music was talked about quite a lot, but cosplay as well. Digital engagement was key, on-demand services and social media. One thing that we found particularly interesting was influences, and that element of developing self-confidence in terms of public speaking skills, thinking about the traditional values, peer recommendations coming across as really important. And that's something that comes up kind of in arts research generally, that people are often exposed to the arts and culture through friends and family, and the young people particularly talked about that. Travel access and cost, a challenge that many of us face with engaging with young people, and having a direct link to creative industries as well is key for engagement. Barriers, balancing school and college work alongside their hobbies, few visual arts or craft-based opportunities, and this perceived quality and value for money. We all know there are certain things that young people won't bat an eyelid at spending money on, but then there are other things that they sort of question the value of. Lack of confidence and self-belief, and a concern about not fitting in, particularly when taking up new activities or going to meet new groups of people, and a lack of resources and opportunities within schools as well. So this leads to the recommendations from the report. So for the education sector, a continued focus on Arts Mark and Arts Awards to encourage engagement both within school and the wider cultural community. To refine and develop an understanding of creative skills. So some teachers didn't feel confident in supporting in some creative skills, and particularly with view to careers. Address areas of deprivation, and that was something that was looked at in the report, and looking at how we can nurture those relationships between the education sector and the creative industries. Cultural sector needs to think about quality assurance. This is something that schools ask us about. You know, how do you know if a cultural provider is good? Better understanding of the Gatsby's benchmark in terms of careers and how cultural providers can add value to secondary schools through meeting those Gatsby benchmarks. Looking at the CEIAG provision with a focus on progression routes within creative industries, and then technological innovation. And teachers have had a challenging year getting to grips with technology, but this might be, as have some cultural organisations, so looking at how we can use technology going forward. And then in terms of the HSEP future plans, so help the cultural sector to support secondary schools to deliver against Gatsby's benchmark. Alignment with the University of Hertfordshire on outreach models, deliver activities in primary schools and working with young families, and deliver practical ideas as part of a wider cultural ecology. And what's been fantastic for us is the Arts Council funded national programme for LSEP's local cultural education partnerships. So the chance to talk to other people across the country and find out what they're doing and share good practice is going to be instrumental in building on these recommendations. So yeah, next steps, we're in phase 2, so we're commissioning projects at the moment with our partners, and we'll feed back to you on that later in the year. And then we're looking to bring our partners back together through the steering group, strategy and action plan, and hopefully at some point get back all in the same room again. Thank you.
Fab. So if you want to get involved, keep in touch, or know more about what we're doing, please have a look at our website for the Hertfordshire Cultural Education Partnership, and follow us on Twitter. If you want to know more about what our Royal Opera House Bridge is doing, particularly for support for cultural providers, we run training, we do have occasional funding, that kind of thing, then do have a look at our website and follow us on Twitter as well. And then if you want to get in touch with us personally, you're very welcome to. We have a project officer called Imrana, and her email's there, and Maria's email is there. And then if you want to get in contact with me, you're very welcome to as well. But that's it. So thank you very much. And I'm not sure we'll have time for questions, but if we do, we'll be very happy to answer them.